What does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
I think what's coming up for me right now is like staying true to you and your values and being like bold and courageous in who you are in the midst of a world that might try to pull you in 10,000 different directions. I mean, it's so easy to get lost in the noise, especially in entrepreneurship. You spend 5 minutes on social media, you're like, man, this is who am I actually? It's very hard to stay grounded in you amidst all of that. And so for me, what gutsy means is having the courage and the boldness to stay true to who you are.
Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, the show where you learn how to own what you actually want and shift the mind junk that's been holding you back. I'm LauraAura, keynote speaker, coach, and your guide to help you get clarity, build confidence, and make the gutsy moves that change your life. Each week, I'm going to help you simplify things by teaching you how to get out of your head while stepping into action. This way you can achieve all those life shifts that you've been overthinking. Your desire, that drives you. But gutsy, that's what gets it done. Your business, it technically works, but you feel consistently exhausted by it. Look, so many entrepreneurs build businesses that depend on them for everything. Every decision, every email, every task, every moving piece. And at first, that hustle feels productive. It feels responsible, maybe even successful. Until one day you realize you didn't build freedom, you built yourself another job. In today's conversation with Jason Moss, we're talking about the shift from operator to owner and why that shift is about so much more than delegation or systems. We get into the nervous system side of entrepreneurship, why so many founders get addicted to the doing, the deeper fears underneath control, and what it actually looks like to build a business that supports your life instead of consuming it. This is practical stuff, but it's also deeply honest. Your growth in business isn't just a strategy, it's an identity, a trust, a learning how to let go of the things that are keeping you stuck at your current capacity. So if you've been feeling a little overextended, stuck in the weeds, or like your business can't function without you, this conversation is going to give you a lot to think about. Jason Moss is a business mentor for grounded, growth-minded entrepreneurs who are ready to scale without losing themselves in the process. Creator of the CEO Freedom Formula, Jason helps six-figure coaches and service providers shift out of operator mode and into sustainable leadership with a business model that supports their life, not the other way around. With over 1,000 clients served and 500,000 plus annual revenue, Jason's approach blends strategic depth with soulful clarity. Listen, if you're in that spot where you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to grow beyond this, but I can't keep doing things the way that I've been doing them, this episode is going to hit home. Let's get into it. Jason, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. So this is not your first business. I read that correctly, right?
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur. I mean, my first real business, I was 13 and I built this software program that made it so you had to, I was a big computer nerd and I loved playing computer games growing up. And the problem with playing computer games when you were like in the 90s was that you had to like find the CDs in order to put them in the drive and
Yep.
play the game. So they were always like under a couch cushion or between like the TV and somewhere else, and it would take like 30 minutes to find the CD. So one summer I basically created this program that made it so that it would trick the computer into thinking there was a CD in the drive when there really wasn't. So you could play your favorite games without putting the CD in the computer. And so I spent the summer building this thing, and I was too young to set up a payment processor. So I'd ask my dad, beg my dad, please help me. And he was gracious enough to set one up for me. And I'll never forget that first email, 13 years old, open up my inbox, you've made a sale. And it's been a long time since then, but I've really been hooked on this idea of how do we bridge this connection using this incredible tool of the internet, and how do we use it to add value to other people and change people's lives for the better, and how do we build beautiful businesses online that get to change the world. So it's
Mm,
taken many different forms over the years, but that was really the beginning, was that first computer program.
that's funny. Well, flashback to the 90s. 90s kid here as
Yeah.
well. Like Man, the whole seat, the whole orchestration of CD management was a thing, right?
It was. You used those big booklets.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say if it wasn't the games, it was the booklet in your car. It
Oh
was a
yeah.
it was a whole vibe.
Yeah, people don't realize those days now. The Gen Z, they don't realize. Anyways, I feel like I'm making myself like sound like I'm an 80-year-old man, but yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So you've recently you had a coaching business prior to the one that you're running right now. And I it correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's where you kind of discovered, hey, this isn't working the way that I'm doing it. I'm building it in a way that's not it's not serving me. It's not feeling right. Can you talk to us a little bit about that business and what was going on and what made you pivot?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to school, I studied music, and I learned how to record and mix records basically. And I came out of school, and my first real coaching business was actually teaching other people how to do what I had learned in college. So I built this business called Behind the Speakers, and it was my first six-figure online coaching business. Had the dream on the outside, had courses and was doing, masterminds and group programs and things like that. And it was a profitable, successful business. The problem was that I was completely burned out within it. And I used to joke at that time that I was the janitor and the CEO, and I would wear that with like a badge of honor because I was doing everything myself and I was working 6 days a week and I was building thumbnails on the weekend and I was doing everything from copy to landing pages to web design to customer support when people had issues at like 11:30 at night. And I had figured out how to create a business that worked, but I hadn't yet figured out how to make it work for me. And after several years of running that business, it got to a point where, I mean, I went through, I would say, many cycles of kind of burnout where I would work really hard and then I felt like I was pushing my body beyond where I wanted to go. And then I would step away from that and I'd take a week off or I'd go on a vacation and then I'd come back and I'd repeat the same pattern again and again and again. And after maybe 4 or 5 years of running that business, it got to the point where it was just like, this is not sustainable. And that coincided with me making the shift into helping entrepreneurs and also really reinventing and reimagining the way that I was leading and figuring out, okay, how can I do this differently? Because I've figured out how to create a business using one set of tools, and those tools got me to a certain place, but they did not get me to the place that I think many entrepreneurs want to be, which is freedom, which is the feeling like we have a business that allows us to create a certain lifestyle where we don't feel like we're a slave to the business. And I think that's the trap that many entrepreneurs find themselves in, maybe 1, 2, 3 years in a business. It's like I've built something that works. I know how to make sales. I have figured out some of these things, but I haven't yet figured out how to build a business that allows me to actually lead a life without feeling like I'm just a slave to this thing that I've built.
Yeah.
And so I'm really passionate today about helping entrepreneurs make that transition and learn how to lead differently.
Yeah, I mean, very relatable, you know? I mean, when you go into business, you absorb, you create, you run a lot of different roles. I mean, there's no one else to do it at that point.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, what are some of the things that you see that are keeping people in that operator mode? And maybe we can even back up even just one more step and define like what is the difference between an operator versus an owner? How would you define that?
So there's two different levels that exist within every business. And many people refer to it as working in the business versus on the business. That's the simple way of saying it. And I think of it like you've got the ground floor in the business, which is the doing. And then you've got the person who's actually running the thing. And the owner mindset is looking at the business as kind of like a 10,000 foot overview, right? You see it as these set of interconnected systems. And there's a higher level ability to kind of architect that as a system. And then there's the ground floor, which is like the execution. It's like someone actually coming in and doing those things. And we need both in business, right? We need both the ground floor because if there's no ground floor, nothing gets done. And we also need someone who's actually building the engine and building the system itself. Most entrepreneurs start out as doers They're on the ground floor. They're great technicians. You know, the web designer starts the web design business and they're really good at doing the ground level work because that's how they got started, but they're not great owners. And being an owner is a skill. It's a skill that we can develop. And it's for many entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs who come in through technician based work, which I would say most entrepreneurs that I mentor and work with, they're really good at doing something, whether it's some kind of skill or service or whatever it is, and then they start a business around that. So they're really good at the doing, but they haven't yet figured out how to integrate that higher level thinking. And so it's the ability to really zoom out and start transitioning into this different way of thinking about your business, which is not just being in the ground floor doing all day, but being able to zoom out and see things from this higher level perspective. We definitely dive deeper on that, but that really is the difference between an operator and an owner. And most entrepreneurs are some combination of both, and we need both, right? Unless you're running a much larger business, in which case generally the roles of owner and operator are separate. In most businesses that are under maybe, I don't know, 2 million a year, those two are pretty much blended together in some capacity. So we need to be able to balance and integrate and figure out how to weave between those two hats in the way that we run our business. Otherwise, we create a lot of burnout.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I know that whoever's listening is like, okay, yep, I hear that. How? How?
Yeah.
Because if I'm thinking, it's not getting done. If I'm doing, I'm not thinking. So how do you create that balance? What are some things that entrepreneurs can do to start coming up out of the trenches, but know also then when they need to go back down and get into the doing space?
Well, there's a lot to this. I think on the deepest level, one of the hardest things about this shift is that as entrepreneurs, most of us have become addicted to doing,
Hmm.
and we feel like when we're doing, we are moving forward and making progress. So there's a feeling of momentum when I'm in the weeds in my business. And as soon as I zoom out and start stepping away from that doing, all my anxiety, all my fear, all my, well, what if I'm not constantly working and is this all going to fall apart? And oh my God, I'm not constantly managing and controlling, and all of these deeper fears that we have within ourselves come up. So there's definitely an internal component to working with the nervous system, working with our mind to be able to recondition the way that we see momentum and progress in business. One super practical thing that I often recommend, I just had a client, I was having a call with her. She's running this wellness business and she's done really well. I mean, she's doing like 50, 60K a month. But she, like when one of the first things I'll do with clients, they'll say, I want you to do a time log. And basically every 30 minutes for the next 2 weeks, I want you to write down what you're doing in your business. And so she did this exercise and we looked at it together, and she's front of house like 12 hours, 15 hours a week, like being like a receptionist in this business. And I was like, okay, if you have to pay someone to do this, how much would you pay someone? She was like, well, 30 an hour maybe. And I was like, okay, well, your goal is you're at 50 to 60K. Let's say your goal is you want to make 100K a month, because that's why she signed up to work with me, is she wants to grow her business. So, okay, if we look at that, 100K a month is 1.2 million a year. And let's say as a CEO, you're working 40 hours a week on average. Do you know how much your time is worth if you're making 1.2 million a year? And we did the math and we basically came up with that number, and it was $750 an hour. So basically, at 1.2 million a year, her time is worth $750 an hour in the business. And yet, when we look at where she's spending her time in the business, she's spending 12 hours a week doing stuff that is $30 an hour tasks. So those $30 an hour tasks are stopping her from doing all the things that are actually going to create more growth and leverage in the business, because every hour she spends doing front of house and, answering phones and replying to emails is time she's not doing investing in things like training her team and figuring out better ways to do what they're doing so they can increase revenue and all the things that she should be doing as a CEO. So that's a super practical thing that I think anybody can do, and start to really understand where is your time going. And I think one of the biggest differences between the entrepreneurs that I've seen who have been really successful and those who hit a cap is growth in business almost always requires long-term thinking. So the people who struggle are the people who are like, okay, well, if I'm not doing this thing, if I step out of the weeds, then I'm sacrificing revenue. Then my business is not going to go as fast as I want it to go. And that might be true in the short term if you look at it over the course of, let's say, the next few weeks. Like, hey, if you take the afternoon and you start strategizing instead of just, constantly being on social media posting more, yeah, in the short run, you might make a little bit less money, but you're going to come up with ways to do things that are 2x or 5x or 10x what you're doing right now. And so it's the ability to zoom out and start to see where is our time going? What is it worth? And how do we also do that inner work to be able to meet those deeper layers of fear that come up that stop us from zooming out? And that on the deepest level, I think is really oftentimes what really gets in the way.
Yeah, I can see that wholeheartedly. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. When you start to separate from that busy work where you're equating, if I'm busy, then I'm productive. If I'm busy, then I have worth. If I'm busy, then I'm making something happen. And when you step away from that, that fear gets very loud and your brain goes all over the place. So what are some things that you recommend when we're, because all of this is a lot of identity work, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we're shifting identities and how we are choosing to show up in these different roles. What are some of the things that you teach your clients to help manage that kind of fear space so that we're not just immediately snapping back into the old things that we're so familiar with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's really like the core question. So the first thing is awareness, right? Is just noticing it. Like, wow, this is really interesting. Like I'm feeling a lot of anxiety right now, or I'm feeling a lot of guilt, or I'm feeling just the awareness of noticing it is so much of what it actually takes. For me, I'm a big fan of parts work and I love IFS. If you have not heard of IFS, it's actually a therapeutic modality, but it's a way of working with our internal experience. And the idea is we all have these different parts inside of ourselves. We're not just one person. So we have the part of us that's freaking out when we step away because it's afraid that if we're not constantly working, something's going to fall apart. And so when we're not working, we notice that intense emotional experience within ourselves. For me, what I'll do is I'll go, lay down on my bed, I'll put my hand over my heart, and I'll have a conversation with that part. I'll check in with that part, and I'll hold space for that part. And I'll say, just like I would be comforting like a little child, I'd be like, hey, what's coming up for you? I'm here. And oftentimes there's some tears, and oftentimes there's like a big emotional release. And oftentimes on the deeper level, there are layers, that are far beyond even, what we're talking about on the surface. I mean, memories from childhood, things that come up around, safety and what it means to be safe. Because a lot of this is at the root of what creates these patterns in our business. And so for me, a lot of it is doing that inner work and being able to meet those parts with compassion and love and care. And that over time can help those parts of ourselves soften. And then there's not as much of that like emotional charge or trigger that will pull us back into the doing. So I think that's a big part of it. I love that you mentioned identity too, because it's a big layer of this. And one thing I'll often give clients is, and this is really helpful, is like, you know, the decisions you make in your business are really they're a reflection of your identity. And so if you want to make different decisions in a business and you want to move a business to a new place, the fastest way to create change is actually by shifting the identity that's behind all the decisions. So instead of just saying, well, I'm going to stop doing, you can start asking a question like, well, let's say you're at 6 figures, you want to get to 7 figures. You're like, okay, well, what would a 7 figure entrepreneur do in this situation? How would a 7 figure entrepreneur be spending their time today? How would I lead my day if I was already making 7 figures? And that's a great lens to try on. And I'll often recommend clients they can spend you can spend like 5 minutes in the morning just closing your eyes and imagining yourself moving through your day as the entrepreneur who already has the level of income or clients or revenue or whatever it is that you want. And then that becomes like a filtering mechanism as you move through your day. And you look at your calendar and you're like, okay, this is like a six-figure calendar. This isn't a seven-figure calendar. Well, half the things on this calendar I wouldn't be doing if I was already making seven figures. So you can start using that as a filter to make decisions and lead your day differently. So I think it's identity work can be a piece of it for sure, but if we don't address the deeper nervous system that's underneath it and these fears and the parts of ourselves that are feeling triggered, then ultimately I think that's just kind of it's a little bit more surface level. And I think a combination of both of those approaches can be really useful and valuable in creating change.
Oh, absolutely. That awareness, just that subtle pause and allowing that to come up and have its space versus pushing it off or compressing it or I'll get to it later. I it's such a huge shift. It seems
Yeah.
so simple. And I know a lot of people want to avoid like the feelings and the emotions and stuff, but listen, in business, your feelings don't go away. They come to the front of the line.
They're
they're gonna
everything. I
they're
mean,
gonna show up whether you want them to or not.
yeah, I love this is why I love entrepreneurship because it really is just a beautiful mirror. And I see the journey of business is really just a reflection of who we are. And so it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to do that inner work and to be able to meet those parts of ourselves and heal. And then the business grows really as a result of that. It's not something separate from that. It really is the path to that. You can't outgrow your internal capacity.
That's for sure. What about because again, this is just one of those sticky spots I know a lot of entrepreneurs get into where it's like, okay, I can see how I need to operate differently. Okay. But I need the help to be able to do that. I need the support. I need the team. I need an assistant. I need someone to help offload some of this stuff too. But maybe I'm either not there yet to be able to do that, or I have reservations around letting go of things. Talk to me in that
Yeah.
space a little bit.
Yeah, there's two things that come up there quite commonly. The first is like control. It's like I don't want to let go of things because I'm afraid someone else isn't going to do them as well as I can, or they're not going to do them the right way. So that's one thing. We can definitely talk about that. But I want to talk about another thing first, which is like a lot of folks will delay hiring because they don't feel like they have the revenue to support it. It's like I can't hire the assistant because I'm not making enough money to hire the assistant. And it's kind of like this loop, right? So I think the most important thing around that front is as entrepreneurs, we have to zoom out. And if you make decisions based on your current level of revenue and you use your current level of revenue to basically determine what's possible for you, it's very hard to get beyond that level of revenue. In other words, if I just looked at our business today and said, okay, we're making X amount of money, well, we can't hire this person, we can't hire that person because we don't have the income to support it. The thing that I'm missing in that is, okay, well, if I hire someone and I take half of the stuff that I'm doing right now off my plate, well, what's that going to free up for me? And well, okay, if I'm not spending 20 hours a week doing admin, well, now I can run two or, three webinars a month instead of one, or I can do, twice as many sales calls, or I could do things that are more revenue generating activities. And okay, if I were to fast forward 6 months, where is our business going to be as a result of that? And let me look at where we are in 6 months or 1 year, and let me use that to determine whether or not we should hire this person today, rather than just looking at what's right in front of us. I think that's the mindset around like hiring. Most entrepreneurs hire too late, especially with like stuff like assistants and like VAs and stuff like that. They're such no-brainer hires, and they can be made earlier than many entrepreneurs think. And that can free you up. Even if you're in the earlier stages of your business, it can free you up to be able to really focus on things that are going to move the business forward so much faster. But most entrepreneurs will delay those decisions, and they'll waste their time doing, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $20 an hour tasks when they could be spending their time doing stuff that's going to, generate 10 times or 100 times the income.
That shift from operator to owner, yeah, it requires systems and processes, but beyond that, it requires a shift in the way that you choose to show up. In Aura the Mastermind, which is for female entrepreneurs that are at that tipping point where you know you're ready for that next level, you just need some help getting there. One of the big pieces that we focus on throughout our time together in Aura is shifting the way that you choose to show up. How does the future version of you the version of you that has what you are striving for, how does she make decisions? How does she protect her time? How does she show up differently? When we identify who she is and how she moves, we can start implementing those same things today. Because the way you start living in her reality is to start moving like she already exists. If you're kind of curious if Auraline is right for you, go to LauraAura.com/clarity to book a free clarity session. Or if you're like, fuck it, I'm in, go to LauraAura.com/mastermind to get started today. Yeah. When you say that most entrepreneurs hire too late, what would you consider too late? I mean, we can always make adjustments, right? But when you're in it, what would you consider too late?
Mostly it's like you hire to replace, like a lot of entrepreneurs will wait until like something breaks down.
Yeah.
It's like their health or like, you know, or it's just there's so much pain. It's like I remember I worked with an entrepreneur who was working like 80 hours a week. She had a newborn son and she wasn't like spending any time with her son. And it's like stuff like that's just crazy to me. But so I think it's rather than waiting until there's like a burning problem, looking at looking at it from a standpoint of leverage, which is what would be possible for me as a result of this hire, and can I zoom out and look at it through that lens? I think that oftentimes leads to hiring a lot earlier, and can really allow growth to happen much faster. But I think on the other side, like to your point around the control thing, because that's the other thing that gets in the way is like a lot of people just don't want to hire because they're afraid of letting go. I can certainly relate to this. I definitely am not so much anymore, but I very much, when I look at where I was in that first business back in 2016, the online coaching business, and I was doing everything myself, and so much of it was like, yeah, I could hire a graphic designer, but they can't do thumbnails as good as me. And I have this perfect style that I really like, and no one can write copy as good as me. And, yeah, that might be true actually to a certain extent. But if I'm hanging on to everything because I'm so afraid that if I let it go, that someone else isn't going to be as good and they're not going to do it exactly the way I want, then I'm just putting this cap, like I'm never going to be able to grow beyond a certain point. So I think for me, I've had to accept that like 80% done by someone else is better than 100% done by me. And can I actually lower the bar? Can I accept that people aren't going to do things exactly the way I want them to? And that's okay. And can I also like really relax into trust, which is knowing that I have and I can surround myself with really good people and let go of that control. And a lot of that for me has been like the inner work of how do I create safety from the outside in, which is what most entrepreneurs do, and really becoming aware of that and reclaiming safety as an internal experience, which I can talk about more, but I think that's often underneath the pattern of like the control freak. And I don't name that as like a negative thing because I would include myself in that. I think actually underneath the surface, it's an entrepreneur who has attached safety to all these things on the outside. And so it feels like an existential threat when we let go of those things. It's like, well, if I'm not the one hanging on to this, then that part of me that feels like it's associated safety to doing that thing or feeling like I'm the one who has all the reins is going to get triggered. So it's being able to work with that internal experience to create an internal feeling of safety so that around me and external to me, I can let go of some of those things and not feel like that safety is being threatened on the inside.
Listen, we could do a whole episode on that alone because we do, whether it's conscious or subconscious or a combination of the both, we do associate the work that we do with safety. And
Yeah.
like money comes to mind. Like the more work that I'm doing, the more I have my hands on it, I'm in control of my income. And if you've had a challenging relationship with money or scarcity as part of your story, then yeah, we're going to trigger your safety around money. If we're talking
Yes.
about visibility, and we're
All
handing off
safety.
graphics or content or newsletters or anything that has communications, and we're talking about visibility and we're giving it away to someone, it's like, oh, am I going to be seen as the way that I want to be seen? It all comes back to safety.
Yep, that is the core of it, is we're terrified to not be safe. And it's human, it's
It's
human. But
human
how do
nature.
we work with those parts of ourselves? And I think if the good news is you can do that work and there's ways to move through that. And being grounded in an internal sense of safety, which means my safety is not dependent on anything outside myself, whether it's money, whether it's me hanging on to a certain client, whether it's all those things. If I can reclaim safety as an internal experience, which is absolutely possible, then I can be in this much more relaxed relationship with my business and everything around me. And that makes hiring easier, it makes sales easier, it makes growing and scaling easier because you're not gripping everything so tightly.
Yeah. You said something earlier too that I'm like, I think this is a real question we have to ask ourselves when we're talking about letting go of things and delegating and shifting this role. Are If you're having resistance and hesitation, are you okay staying at the same level, at the same capacity that you're at right now? Like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
just feel like that's a very black and white, non-emotional type of approach. And if the answer is yes, then okay, keep doing things the way you're doing them. But if the answer is no, I think that somehow gives us permission to know that it's okay to shift something. Thoughts on that?
totally. Well, yeah, and it's a good point too, because I think oftentimes even in these conversations, there's this underlying assumption that growth is always better and that that's the thing that we should always be aiming for as entrepreneurs. And I'm not someone who actually subscribes to that belief. I think that there's a natural size that's aligned for every business. And I have no value judgment on the entrepreneur who, like, good or bad, who says, "Hey, I just want a boutique business. I want to make, 5 or 10K a month, and that's where I want to be, and that feels really good for me, and I want to be the one who's, kind of holding all the reins." I just I ordered some new shaving supplies this week, and I ordered this like boutique kind of artisan soap from this guy. I think he's in Wisconsin, who makes these soaps, and I was reading his website. And he's like, there are some things that sell out sometimes because I can't, always make them. And I work when I want to work, and I don't always have control over when things are in stock. And things might take a little bit longer to ship if I'm really busy. And I still ordered from him, and I'm excited to get the soap. And it was really cool. It was like, okay, he's doing his thing. And then there's people who are like, I really want to grow and scale, and I want to make a bigger impact, and I want to serve a lot of people. And that's beautiful too. So there isn't one right answer. And scale and growth is not always the right next step for everyone. I think it's important to honestly ask yourself that question and to separate it from someone else's idea of what you need. Because oftentimes in conversations like this, business mentors and business coaches, there is this kind of underlying assumption that growth is always better. And that isn't the answer. Growth is just more. And sometimes more is better if that's what you really want. And sometimes it's not. So it's a great question to ask yourself. And ultimately, I think getting really clear on like what actually is it that you want, what's going to allow you to create the level of impact, the level of income, the lifestyle, the level of contribution that you really want to make, and then let the strategy be the thing that follows from that.
Yeah, I love the story about this guy with the soap because I just picture this guy like living his life, making a soap, doing his
He's
day
doing
how
his
he wants to
thing
do
and he's
his
happy. Yeah.
and that's the key right there, Jason. He's happy. I mean, we're making an
Yeah.
assumption here based off of website
Right. We don't
content,
know
but
actually for
but
sure.
but
Yeah.
one could maybe assume that he's happy, and I think that's sometimes we have to remind ourselves, especially in business, we didn't start this business because we were bored. We didn't start this business because we wanted to, build a life that ultimately ran us. We started this business for a life that has flexibility and freedom and whatever it is for you. Like, are we still in line with that? Or have we gotten on somebody else's path or timeline? And are we trying to
Yeah.
force ourselves to do something that's not for us?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it can be challenging to really tease out in a world where there's so many stories and so many different narratives about what business is supposed to be. And so being able to really discern like what's true for me and then to stay rooted in that. And I've had many chapters of, veering off the path and coming back to center and, misalignment and realignment. It's definitely a dance. It's not something you arrive at, but it's the most important thing at the end of the day.
For sure. Last question I want to ask you here today is maybe something a little bit more technical. When we're shifting from operator to owner, are there any schedule shifts or way that we operate our days or weeks that you would recommend as someone is starting to step into more of this owner CEO role?
I'm reflecting on that.
Yeah, you're good.
I think that one thing I often see and I've seen in my own evolution is the difference between a maker's calendar and a manager's calendar. And oftentimes, like we go straight into managing. And so you'll see entrepreneurs who wake up, the first thing they do, I've done this and I still do this to a certain extent. So I'm not like trying to pretend that I have it all figured out either, but it's so easy to just check the email and just get into like, well, what's the urgent thing that I need to do? What's the thing that the client wants, or what's the thing that makes me feel that sense of like momentum that we were talking about earlier, but may not actually be like the highest leverage thing for me to be focused on. And so oftentimes in this shift from operator to owner, there's a shift in your calendar and your priorities. Like for example, you might see more of someone in an operator's mindset is like their first few hours of the day are all like task-based activities that are very much like ground floor. It might be client calls, or it might be just kind of more of the doing type of stuff in their business. Whereas more of an owner might spend the first like 2 to 3 hours with thinking time. And this is a great shift that I will often recommend folks is like, I forget what book I read a while back, but this was an idea of thinking time. It was like blocking off an hour on your schedule first thing in the morning and just using that as like a journaling session to reflect on a specific challenge you might be having in your business and to just journal on it and think on it. And those are like owner level like activities. So in an owner's calendar, there's actually oftentimes a lot more white space. There's a lot more thinking time. There's a lot more like high level strategy type stuff. And those are often the things that will be prioritized first, like first few hours of the day when you're freshest, versus someone who's more of an operator is going to be more like you might see it packed. And there's more of that kind of ground level doing. So practically, like I would recommend just block off an hour of time, maybe first thing, hour in the morning, to just spend thinking through a challenge that you have in your business. And that's honestly oftentimes one of the highest leverage things that you can do in your day.
So great. Jason, you have such a grounded presence to you. I love your messaging. I love the way that you're showing up. And I want to
Thanks.
make
I
sure that,
appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure everyone knows where they can get some more of you. So, what's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to jasonmoss.com. That's my website. And we've got our link to our Instagram there. We've got a great training actually on marketing from resonance, which is a different approach to marketing that I share and teach with all the clients I work with. It's what I use in my business. If marketing has ever felt like aggressive or pushy or just misaligned or inauthentic, a lot of folks feel like, man, I feel like I'm just shouting on social media all day, or I'm being super pushy or salesy. And I want an approach to showing up in marketing and attracting clients that feels more like me, allows me to be who I am. This masterclass is a recording and it's available for free on our site, walks through that whole new approach and how I've been able to integrate it into our business as well as the clients that we work with. It's a really cool free training. You can get that on the website. If you just click the banner on the website, you should be able to download that or watch that. And I would say that those are some great places to start. We've got lots of free trainings and live events we're running every single month. So if you watch the resonance training, you'll end up on our email list, and we can keep you posted on all of that. And I love hearing from people too. So you can always shoot me a message on Instagram and say hello. And yeah, I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we link that masterclass below. And I'm curious, what does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
I think what's coming up for me right now is like staying true to you and your values and being like bold and courageous in who you are in the midst of a world that might try to pull you in 10,000 different directions. I mean, it's so easy to get lost in the noise, especially in entrepreneurship. You spend 5 minutes on social media, you're like, man, this is who am I actually? It's very hard to stay grounded in you amidst all of that. And so for me, what gutsy means is having the courage and the boldness to stay true to who you are. That's what gutsy means to me.
This is such an important conversation. Seriously, like I've built 3 businesses now at this point in my career. And I can tell you that one of the biggest shifts that you will ever make is getting your hands out of every single thing that you have created. I know it's tricky. I know you like to have control over things. I know you want it done just right, but listen, you've got bigger things to do. And staying down in the weeds of every single part of the process is stopping you from being able to achieve that. And I can promise you that there is somebody out there that absolutely loves the work that you hate. You know, that part of your business where you procrastinate and you put it off, and every time you have to go do it, you're like, oh, this freaking thing. Yeah, somebody loves to do that. So let's lovingly give that project to them so that you can focus on what you do best. If you're ready to start making some of these shifts in your business and you want a sidekick as you do it, Auraline is the place for you. So go to LauraAura.com/mastermind to learn more and maybe even get started today. Come find me. I'm on social. My handle is @thatLauraAura across all the platforms. And as always, until I see you next time, stay gutsy.